On this Maundy, Thursday, I'm reading excerpts from John 13, 3 through 35. Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, got up from the table, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with a towel that was tied around him. He came to Simon Peter and said to him, "Lord, you're not going to wash my feet." And Jesus answered, "You do not know what I am doing, but you will later understand." Peter said to him, "You will never wash my feet." And Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no share with me." And Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet, but also my hands and my head." And Jesus said to him, "One who is bathed does not need to wash except for the feet, but is entirely clean. When you are clean, though not all of you." After he washed their feet, had put on his robe, and had returned to the table, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for that is what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have set an example for you, that you should do as I have done to you. Very truly I tell you, servants are not greater than the master, nor are messengers greater than the one who sent them. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them. I am not speaking to all of you. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and as I said to the Jews, now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. You should always love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love one for another. The disciples were undoubtedly shocked and amazed when Jesus took up the basin and the towel and began to wash their feet. He was their master. He was their Lord. Foot washing was not something that masters did. Imagine you're surprised that the President of the United States was shining someone's shoes, or think about if the Queen of England was giving someone a pedicure. In the days of Jesus, foot washing was typically done by the servants of one's household. Obviously not a glamorous job. People's feet were really dry and dirty and calloused and cracked when they walked around for miles wearing sandals. To wash someone's feet was an act of hospitality and care, but it was also an act of servitude and humility. So it's no wonder Simon Peter told Jesus, "You will never wash my feet." Not Jesus, not my master, not ever. But still there Jesus was with a wash basin and towel. He knelt in front of them one by one and washed their feet, calluses and all. When he was done, he told them, "I'm setting an example for you. You also should do what I have done to you." I kind of wonder in that moment, the disciples finally get it? I mean, they'd been hand-selected by Jesus from the crowds of people, from the smelly dregs of farms, from boat docks, he had called them, and he'd given them new meaning in their lives. With him, they were something special. He had elevated them above the plow and the fishing net, or at least so it seemed. You know, this story in John reminds me of a story my mentor during my clinical pastoral education shared with me. He was an Air Force chaplain many years ago, and he recounts the birth of his first child. He stood in the waiting room, he says, nervous as could be, and finally, after what seemed like forever, a nurse called him back into the nursery to meet his newborn son. Back in those days, they really didn't have ultrasounds and sonograms, and husbands weren't allowed into the room of birthing. So he found out that he was having a boy the minute he looked him right in the face. The nurse let him hold the boy. He says he remembers looking at that tiny bundle in his arm and asking God, What in the world am I going to do? And in that moment, he imagined what God might say back to him. The answer was, just love him. When I think back to the birth of my own 6 children, I remember holding each one of those tiny bundles in my arm and seeing them face to face for the first time. Suddenly, I was a father. In the soft wheezing of a swaddling newborn, the world had immediately changed for me. While I was certainly overcome with joy and elation, I also had a healthy dose of anxiety and uncertainty mixed in. Each of those amazing events was one of those moments where I asked God, what in the world am I going to do? And once again came the answer, just love them. I think that's really the message Jesus was giving to his disciples and the message he's giving to us today. He's preparing them and preparing us for a time when he's no longer with them, and we will be the ones doing the ministry. We'll be the ones standing in front of crowds of people, staring right into the faces of sinners of all shapes and sizes, staring in the face of those who suffered from brokenness and longing to be whole people. The disciples and us, without Jesus, will have plenty of times when we'll be thinking, what in the world are we going to do? But they and us will remember Jesus and the wash basin and towel. We'll remember the example he expects all of us to treat others. It's like him saying, see, it's simple. I'm sending you out into the world, to those crowds of people whom I've called you to do your job. Just love them. In the days and weeks and months that follow this Maundy Thursday service, you will undoubtedly see that the church you know will look a lot like its ideal self on its ideal day. In those times, we'll seem every bit like the clean-footed church. You'll also undoubtedly see situations in which our feet look a little dirtier. Around you, there will be people whose spirits are disheartened and weary. They'll be dry and cracked and calloused and worn. And you may find yourself wondering, what in the world are we going to do? But once again, that answer will come. Just love them. This is the word of God for the people of God. Praise be to God.